Joining us now, Philip Bump, senior data editor and columnist at CT Insider. Stuart Stevens is back with us. Philip, when scripture is used alongside pop culture, does that strengthen the administration's message that God is on their side, or does it just raise questions about what they actually know about the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it does any good, certainly in terms of how the administration is trying to reach out to and maintain its relationship with its base, which is heavily religious. I mean, I do think that it's important to recognize that there's been a shift between the two terms of Trump's presidency in how he approaches religion. We saw when he was first elected back in 2016, when he took office, that there had been a shift among religious Americans who were Republicans, who were conservatives, and they saw Donald Trump, while in the past they had tried to hold politicians to a higher moral standard, they saw Donald Trump sort of as an agent of change for their religious movement. They recognized that he wasn't a particularly religious person, but they thought that he was going to be an agent of change and help affect policies that they wanted, which in fact he did. But in the second term, it's been different, and he and his cabinet have been very overtly religious, invoking a lot of religious iconography and language in a way that is different than we saw in the first administration. I think that's getting him into trouble, and I think this is an example of that.
Stuart, President Trump has said in the middle of this feud he has no plans to meet with the Pope, and then made false allegations about Leo. Here's part of what he said.
I'm not fighting with him. The Pope made a statement. He says Iran can have a nuclear weapon. I say Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if the Pope looked at the 42,000 people that were killed over the last 2 or 3 months as a protester with no weapons, no nothing, I mean, you take a look at that. So I can disagree with the Pope. I have a right to disagree. I have a right to disagree with the Pope. The Pope can say what he wants, and I want him to say what he wants, but I can disagree.
Besides it being untrue, I don't know, Stuart, do you think it's unlikely people will buy the idea that the Pope wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon or is oblivious to the deaths of innocent people?
Yeah, first we get off this Pete Hegseth thing. I think there's a very sound theory that Pete Hegseth's staff hates him, and that's why they do this stuff. It's sort of like Anchorman. They know they can put this stuff in a speech, and Hegseth won't know it, and then he'll say it, and it'll look like an idiot. Sort of like the same people who dress him, that put him in these sort of, clown suits. But look, I think about sometimes what it's like to work for Trump, and you're sitting around and you go, okay, we're in a fight with the Pope. Well, what are we going to do? I mean, it is just such a classic unforced error. It's sort of like a punchline to a joke. So what if you got in a fight with the Pope? I mean, Catholics in this country are a key voting bloc. I worked for Bush in 2004. We were tied with Catholics when he ran against Gore. He won them when he ran against Kerry, and if he hadn't, he wouldn't have been president. Many very engaged voters. And I think that people, it's just something about it. There's just one more thing about Trump that just seems just unseemly and weird and creepy. You're fighting with the Pope. I don't know. It's also a good sort of indicator that you don't see a lot of other Republicans taking up this banner to, hey, I'm going to get in a fight with the Pope, too. This seems to be working.
Philip, the Wall Street Journal's Peggy Noonan writes this: Leo can take care of himself, adding, to the extent anyone ever wins these things, he will. He has a better sponsor and better writers. So classic Peggy Noonan. Do you see any signs that Donald Trump is beginning to realize this may be the one person in the world he can't win a fight against?
I don't know that Donald Trump views these tensions in that way, right? I think that Donald Trump's default position is that he wants to be the victor, even in a feud like this, which I think is entirely one side. I mean, yes, Leo, the Pope, has said things, obviously in response to President Trump and, critical of policies, but the direct back and forth is almost exclusively on Trump's side. And, I think it's worth noting, my mom is an Episcopal priest. Like, I have heard language about, akin to what we heard from the Pope in the clip that you showed my entire life. Like, this is very standard rhetoric for religious leaders about peace and about, and loving one's neighbors and these sorts of things. And I think it really shows. There was this poll that came out this week from Pew Research Center, which showed that very few Americans view Donald Trump as particularly religious, including only half of Republicans. It is understood that he's not a religious person. And I think that, again, this gets him into trouble because he has increasingly been willing, and his cabinet's been increasingly willing to step into this realm of rhetoric and debate around religion where they're just ill-prepared to engage. And I think that's noticeable to his base, and I think it's noticeable more broadly as well.
And Stuart, while all that's going on, the Trump administration is gutting funding to Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Miami, which uses the money to run a foster care system for undocumented minors. MS Now's Alex Tabbitt asked Miami's Archbishop about next steps after HHS decided to end that nearly 70-year-long partnership. Listen to this.
You've made clear, as I just noted, that this has nothing to do with the feud between the Pope and the President. But does that complicate the process of reinstating this funding, do you think?
Well, it could, but I think it could. But if everybody, acts like an adult, it shouldn't.
Are you confident that will happen?
Well, hope springs eternal.
He has so many Catholic leaders right now. It's not just the Pope, who is, by the way, popular outside of the Catholic Church and is resonating with evangelical voters as well, but on a much more local level. How do you think gutting Catholic Charities at a time like this, when there are so many impacts of a war that Donald Trump started, is going to resonate?
Yeah, and this comes on the heels of closing down USAID, which is likely to result in deaths of millions of people, of whom, a certain percentage, I couldn't tell you how many, but not a small percentage, are going to be Catholic. Not that should matter, they're human beings. There is a deliberate cruelty to what the Trump administration does. It resonates throughout their whole sort of being. Stephen Miller, Donald Trump always getting in these fights, this angriness. You have J.D. Vance going to Hungary to campaign for someone who has argued against mixed-race families. And J.D. Vance has a mixed-race family. It's sort of like this common assumption of decency as a virtue, and kindness as a virtue, and humility as a virtue, has been completely lost. And that used not to be a partisan thing. If you go back and you read George Bush's acceptance speech at the 2000 Republican convention, it reads like a document from a lost civilization. It's all about humility and service. And that Republican Party has been destroyed, if it ever existed. And I think it's just very, very sad and detrimental to our kind of national ethos that we don't have this. And I hope we can get back to it.